Welcome to Almost Cancelled. I am Peter, and today I'm going to be talking about Foundation, Season 1, Episode 2. It is called Preparing to Live. Preparing to live with the memory of this terrible episode of TV. How did this get so bad? Like, so quickly? I was genuinely... I mean, it wasn't perfect, Episode 1, but there was a lot of good ideas. There was a lot of interesting concepts. You sometimes have the episode 2 slump because you have to, you've got so much new stuff to set up in the first episode that sometimes episode 2 can linger a little bit and feel like it's retreading some of the same ground. But this wasn't that. This was just painfully dull. It was painfully dull until it was like some weird choices in the writing were being made, and not in a way that was satisfying or mysterious, just in a way that was actively annoying. Like it was just moving through plot points that didn't really make a whole lot of sense. So, where to begin? I mean, first things first, like back in the planet, the Empire, they're investigating who blew up the big skylift thing, and this boils down to, I mean, there's the investigation, which leads to the big sort of overly dramatic, like, the two races of different planets that they think may be responsible. They end up just firing missiles at their planets, killing millions of their population, leaving these two leaders alive and sending them back. So proper evil stuff. I didn't really feel anything for this scene, though. This was more of the hammy Emperor, Lee Pace, just doing his Lee Pace, like, overacting, and, like, I am dramatic and evil, and yeah. But a lot of this was the old man. It was Dusk, who... he starts to kind of have a bit more sympathy? Well, maybe not sympathy. But he's definitely more reflective, and he wants to go down and talk to the priest that Gale spoke to. We see him having a moment of weakness where he kind of trips or shakes when he's going up a ladder and he's trying to paint the mural. And that scene I thought was terrible, actually. I thought that scene was actively bad. I thought the staging and the performance of it, with him kind of losing his shit and like flipping the table, just all felt a bit comical to me. So I thought that was actively bad, and it's not the only actively bad scene in this episode, unfortunately. But I didn't really get a whole lot out of much of this, other than just being bored, if I'm honest. Like, it just kind of felt like it was taking ages to make some really simple points. It was, the Empire's this evil, even though these two, like, civilizations might not be to blame, we're going to kill millions of them anyway. Okay, get it, they're evil. And there's good ideas here. It's not like the idea of the older version of the same person, right? We've seen it in stuff with clones before, right? Science fiction, where the wiser clone, the one who's older and experienced things, it's a good way of showing that someone can grow and learn. And you have the younger one who kind of disregards, sees it as a weakness. There's potential there in the storytelling. But unfortunately, none of it really resonates, I don't think, that much in this. Scenes are far too padded out. They go on too long. The writing's not all that engaging. A lot of it is Lee Pace standing looking menacing. Their main lady, who turns out to be a robot, an android, who it turns out there was android sympathizers once upon a time, but they were all killed. Like, again, fine sci-fi ideas. But most of this was painful. And the sad part is that the bad pacing of this episode, where it felt like it was just crawling and an idea, whereas the first one didn't. The first one felt like it was always moving. This one feels like it's crawling through its ideas and plot. Well, it feels like it's crawling through its plot until it suddenly just like catapults things ahead, in a way, not in time. I don't mean there's a time jump. I mean it catapults how we're supposed to feel about certain things as we go. Because as much as the pacing's a problem in this episode, it's not actually the biggest problem. It may be enough to not want to watch the show anymore if this is what the episode to episode feeling is going to be. If this is what how dull it's going to be episode to episode, then that would be enough to stop watching it. But that is not the biggest problem of this episode. So let's examine everything on the ship, because the stuff on the ship is the stuff where we really have to dig in. We have this relationship, this romantic relationship that is set up between Raish and Gale. At the start of the episode, they have this scene in the pool where she pulls him in and they end up, they start having sex and it cuts away, right? Fine. If it was a little bit of a jump, because it felt like episode 1 did have kind of a chemistry, it felt like, oh, these two are probably going to be romantically involved at some point. It kind of leaps ahead a little bit in episode 2. That's not necessarily a huge deal, but the problem is that by the end of the episode, we already kind of go through so many big dramatic beats that are meant to resonate because they're supposed to be a couple. Their feelings for each other are supposed to enhance a lot of plot points throughout the rest of this episode, and they don't enhance any. In fact, because we're just thrown into this deep end with them being a couple, it just doesn't. It just it almost ricochets off you, and it doesn't affect you anymore. And they take it too far. There's a conversation later in this episode where they talk about having babies. They're like, "Hey, do you want to have kids in the future?" And he's like, "I want all of it with you." And we're not at this point with these characters yet. You've established these characters, you've established the pacing, and yet the actual drama between them is like way ahead where it should be, and it feels so false and fake and just fabricated because of that. And it just rings false. It doesn't feel right when you're seeing these scenes, and he's crying in the scene and they're having dramatic sex again later in the episode. It just feels false. And when you have your big dramatic cliffhanger ending later on where he's saying I love you and he's ejecting her from the station and the ship, all of it just feels like a big wet fart. And that's not what you want. Even and this is a smaller complaint, but there's even like because even early on, before it lost me, right, I was still kind of being optimistic and hopeful and wanting to like the show early on. There was a slight problem at the start where it kind of like tells you they're a couple twice, and either one would have been fine. The second would have probably been better on its own, because after the scene in the pool, there's a scene where they're walking to the station, and the scene's got a point. It's got a clear purpose. It's to tell us that Gale is obsessively trying to learn how to do everything that will be required once they land on the planet. So she's learning all of the different departments' jobs, the agriculture, the I don't know, the power grid. Well, the power grid. You know what I mean? Like all of the different parts that takes a colony to function. She's trying to learn how to do every single thing when there's entire departments of people training to do each of these areas, and she's determined to do all of it. And it's okay, so that gives us a bit of a character beat. It's kind of, she's obsessive, she doesn't trust other people, she has to feel like she can fix every problem should something come up. Okay, that's fine. And at the end of the scene, there's a little moment where he sort of spins her around onto the wall and gives her a kiss. And it's kind of like, oh, that little moment on its own would have been enough to tell us, hey, they're a couple now. And it would have probably been better because it wouldn't have been as overly sentimental and in your face as the first, because the first one they're kind of getting closer, they're kind of smelling each other, they end up kissing, and then they have sex in the pool. It's like too much, it's excess. This one is a bit more restrained, and on its own it'd be fine. That said though, if you'd had this scene in the pool and you wanted that instead, you could just end this scene before the kiss part. It would have been fine. Like it felt like it was a redundant point. We'd already made this point. So we have that problem. We have this relationship feeling rushed and unearned. We also have the core like conflict to the episode, which is between Raish and Selden, which ends in a dramatic murder. And most of it is implied and off camera, and it's kind of a big problem because we know so little about some of these characters, and so much of the information that we get about them that hints at the conflict is completely brand new in this episode. So it doesn't feel like it's playing off of anything that we've learned previously. It doesn't feel like we've had nothing's had a chance to kind of linger. Gale doesn't really know about the conflict and is only seeing the signs that we are. So I guess we're seeing it from her perspective, but it isn't really satisfying because so much of it is just out of the blue. There's the hints that yes, Raish finds out that Harry's maths isn't finished, right? The plan for the future and for Foundation is not completely set in stone yet, and that makes him look a little bit worried. But he's already a little bit standoffish with them, and it doesn't really explain why Harry is such a passive-aggressive dick back to him at the dinner scene, where he kind of brings up the story about him being a kid when he took him in, which, for the record, first time we learned about that too, so that's like a big part of their history that's just kind of shoved on us when they're already fighting. when they're already having these tense stares and like being passive aggressive. The whole thing just like escalates in a way where every single time it escalates, it feels like something's not right in the writing. It feels like, wait, what? Why are we doing this now? Um, it, it's the sort of thing where if we got just some other key details, or there was something where we could root for one character or the other, even if it was like a lie, even if like the character we were rooting for turned out to be the one we shouldn't be rooting for later. The problem is right now is that it kind of keeps both characters at arm's length. Selden is kept at arm's length, and there's a hint that he's kind of like worried about his maths and he's kind of struggling with it, but he's not even treated like a character that we get to know. He's treated as this, figure that everyone kind of reveres. Even when Gale's talking to him, and he's a bit more upfront with her, like he still comes across as like he's keeping a lot of cards close to his chest, like he's got a lot of secrets. And then with everyone else, like another really terrible scene in this episode, there's a scene where he goes down to the laundromat area, right? He goes down to that part of the ship, and a woman asks him randomly, like, if he's happy about the progress, like if he's feeling good about where all this is going, and he gives this speech like a politician. He gives this speech about how he's like sure this is all going to go well, and it's because of everyone here. It's because of all of you, because I handpicked every single one of you. And he, to be fair, he does prove that he knows their names, because when she says her name, because he says, "What's your name?" and she gives her first name, he sort of takes a second, he goes, and then he says her surname. He's like, he clearly has memorized the names of everyone on this ship. And maybe that's just something he can do because it's like his maths brain or whatever. But he uses that. And then the part, and I didn't like this. And this all felt really cheesy. It felt really over the top. And I don't blame Jared Harris. I think he's a great actor, but this just was sloppy writing that felt hammy. And what put it over the edge is after this speech, the guy who's getting his shirt for him hands him his shirt and then says, "Dr. Selden, could I shake your hand?" And Selden puts out his hand and shakes his hand, and then he starts going around everyone down there and starts saying thank you as he shakes all of their hands. I hated this scene. This is the sort of scene where whatever you're trying to do with your premise, whatever mystique and whatever character you're trying to set up with this guy who's putting on this public figure, even though he's clearly very concerned in private, everything you're doing with him, it doesn't matter in the context of a scene that's written this poorly. This scene only hurts whatever you're trying to do with him. It makes all the people on this ship feel like they're not real people because they just buy into this really badly delivered speech. And it's not badly delivered from an acting perspective. It's badly delivered because the dialogue is so cookie cutter, good guy politician speak, right? It's just like the most basic thing. We're only going to succeed because of all of you, because you're the best, and I'm going to stroke your egos a little bit. So that I'm like a god to you people, and he shakes their hands and they treat him like a messiah. Like all of this, and I'm not saying that couldn't be the character. Like if the whole point of this is that they do treat him like a messiah, then I think you could do it in ways that feel a little bit less hammy than what this display of worship was. I found myself almost laughing at how on the nose this scene was, much like how a lot of Lee Pacey's acting is on the nose. So all of this stuff on the ship with the characters that I mostly liked in the first episode was really problematic to me. Gale, her association with this relationship hurt her character. And it's not that Raish in himself was... I mean, Raish was fine in the first episode, but in this episode, he is this weird plot device that we don't really understand the context for or know that well. So when he starts acting kind of standoffish, and then when he just kills like a main character, the best actor on the show gets killed off, seemingly, And I get that there's meant to be mystery here. I get that we're supposed to think about, oh, okay, what was the beef? There was clearly more to, what the dispute they had between each other, and there's clearly more to learn that we're going to discover. But it doesn't really matter, because as it's playing out, it's just head scratching. This isn't like when I'm watching a good Twin Peaks episode, or even like a good episode of Lost or something like that, right? Regardless of your opinion, and like I know a lot of people hate Lost and people hate the ending of Lost, and that's fine. But if you go back to early Lost, where most people seem to be on board with it, like the weird things that happen on Lost, the characters reacted very appropriately, and things were treated in a way that felt like, this is weird. Where the hell are we? This is like things. The tone matched what was going on, and I feel like here the tone is like trying to like pretend that we're deeply invested in all of these characters when we're not yet. And what happens in turn is that when Gale, who has a sixth sense, by the way, who just sort of like knows something's wrong when she's in the pool and runs to Selden's office, where he's found with a knife in his chest or his stomach, and Rachel's like, oh, you have to go, Gale, you have to go. When this all plays out, it just comes across as bad theatre. It comes across as a bad list of tropes. This is a scene from any sort of dramatic thriller or even a play where someone is found like murdering someone, but there's more to the story. It just feels trite. There's nothing about this that was interesting or exciting. It was just, this is what we're doing. And it was kind of like shocking in a way, but not shocking in the way that the writers wanted it to be shocking. It was shocking in a way that I was so bored throughout the vast majority of this episode that when we got to this last 5 minutes, I was in shock at just the choices that were being made, and just confused at like why this was supposed to be a hook. Why is this supposed to make me want to keep watching this? And then Raish takes Gale and puts her into like a hypersleep pod thing and ejects her into space. Is she even still going to the same planet as them? Are they going to be like, is she going to land somewhere else and have to like make her own way to the planet to like continue her work? Like, what is this? Like, and there's almost no right now, given how much I just don't give a shit about some of these characters because I've not built them up, and this episode hurt them. Like, I didn't hate the characters in episode 1. In episode 1, they were fresh, they were new, and we're slowly learning. But because this episode tried to force things on them so quickly, and it didn't feel right, it makes them feel like hollow TV characters. And the problem with that is that now I don't care why Raish killed Selden. If Selden does die, maybe he'll somehow survive. Maybe, I don't know if Jared Harris is only here for 2 episodes, or if he is sticking around somehow. But like, I don't care. I almost like, whether it's a conflict with Selden, if this is part of Selden's plan, because Selden, in episode 1 he pulled this, oh, it's all part of the plan. Like, maybe his death's supposed to inspire. Like the only way that Gale would have the drive to like do what needs to be done to make sure this whole idea works is for him to die. I don't care. I actually hate that, because it's a repeat in a way of like episode 1, where, oh, this was all part of his plan and this was what the outcome he foresaw. It doesn't work because we don't have enough of a bond between them yet to buy that his death would affect her this much. It would just be an idea rather than actually feeling it in the writing and actually feeling it in the characters and the reaction. If Raish is actually working for someone, has been paid off to stop this, whether that be the Empire or a third party we don't know yet, I don't care. That's not that. Like, none of it is interesting. All of the possibilities make me groan. That is the worst potential outcome of like a what the F moment that happens like this, right? And obviously there's teases that he's not happy with Selden throughout the episode, but that doesn't alone make this work. Because even the teases beforehand were kind of like, what are we doing with this? Like, I wasn't into any of it. So when it got to this part at the end, my reaction was, I don't care why you did this. I just hate the idea of having to listen to the show explain it to me. I don't want to hear it. I couldn't believe how bad this was. And then it has the gall to end on him going, I love you, as he ejects her into space. Like, you're having conversations about babies, you're having like romantic sex twice in the episode, and you're ending with this big betrayal that makes you look a bad guy and saying I love you as he ejects her into space. And he's probably got some kind of noble-esque reason to why he did this, maybe. and I don't care. I don't care. I can't believe how bad episode 2 of this show is. After episode 1, well, not perfect, had a promising start, and I complimented its pacing, its writing structure, and how it brought its characters together, and the science fiction ideas that it was setting up, which seemed very new and interesting. That's the sad part of this, is that the concept of this show, which is to set up a kind of a safety net for human knowledge, for, you know, after civilization falls so that it can be rebuilt, is a really interesting idea. Comments in the YouTube video and just general things I remember from reading the premise is that in the books, like, there's a big time span, there's jumps ahead, you know, it doesn't just follow a simple narrative with a character going through a story like most stories do. And that was kind of part of the interest, is like, okay, how do they tackle this very unconventional premise in terms of how it's told? And everything about this episode was the most conventional, trite TV shit that it could be. This is actively the opposite of any of the potential that this show potentially was given. I said potentially twice there, I didn't mean that. But you know what I mean? Like, it's frustrating. Like, you come into this hoping that it's going to be kind of unique because of its premise, and it ends up with an episode, its second episode, being the most generic, plodding, drawn out, wheel spinning, forced drama that it could be. And maybe there's, I mean, I can see there's been a time jump after this. Like, maybe Gail is asleep for longer than she's supposed to be. Maybe she pulls a Ripley, and she actually, when she gets to the planet, they've already been there for years, and you know, maybe decades even. Maybe like there's a new generation already there, and she comes into it late. Maybe that's part of the plan. Maybe Selden told Raish to kill him. I don't care though. Oh my god, how to nuke any interest I have in your characters this quickly. And even without all this bad character writing and all this bad intrigue, it was still dull. Like, I was already kind of bored long before I started to feel all this anger about how bad the writing was. Like, all of a sudden, the name David Goyer in the credits for some of the writing and producing all of a sudden makes a lot of sense. I didn't feel he's influenced that much on the first episode, but holy crap, there's definitely some signs of it popping up now. I hated this episode. Like, I hated this episode. I can't believe how much of a turn this took after one episode. Like, I feel like I should give it episode 3 just to see if this was an outlier, but if anything, episode 2 is more reflective of what a show is going to be going forward than episode 1 is, because it's already set its ideas up. It was nice seeing Clark Peters. I like that actor. He's on the ship. That's my positive. That's what I got for you. This was garbage. It still looks expensive. It still looks expensive, and it was nice to see Clark Peters. That's my positives. That's all I can say positive about this. I didn't like anything in this episode. Obviously, the ideas that are still there from episode 1 are still good, but other than that, I hated everything. I hated Selden's interaction with just about everyone in this episode. The forced mystery of what he's up to was not interesting. I felt like, you know, we had a lot about that in episode 1, but that was okay. Now that he's kind of got his cards on the table and this was the plan, the fact that they've went straight back to him withholding things again is just so not interesting to me. Gail's not unlikable, but she's immediately just hurt by the fact that she's tied to this like intense relationship that just feels forced. Raish is just like, we just don't get to know enough about him to really care about his motivations for anything. And then the Empire are just like over dramatic, stoic, and sleep inducing at the best of times. So yeah, I'm done. Jeez, I can't believe how bad this was. Alright, that's me. Thank you very much. Let me know what you thought of episode 2 of Foundation in the comments below. Like and subscribe if you want to support the channel and everything that gets reviewed and all that stuff. Go to patreon.com/MailFuzzTV if you want to support us financially. But otherwise, that is me. So thank you once again for watching or listening. I always appreciate it. Hopefully, other new shows that are starting soon are better than this one, or are better after 2 episodes than this one at the very least. Thank you very much for watching or listening. I always appreciate it. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?